Hello, everyone, and welcome to the
大家
exams
好，欢迎
for the exam school
今天的
recommendation presentation. We have interpretation available in 5 languages for tonight. I'm going to ask if you need interpretation that you would look at the bottom of your screen and locate the world at the bottom of your screen and select the language. I'm going to ask each of our interpreters if they would explain that in their native tongue at this time. So we're going to call on Joy for Chinese Mandarin. Joy, can you unmute yourself and explain in Mandarin for our Mandarin speaking families? While we're waiting for Joy, we're going to call on Dana, our Vietnamese families.
Hoan nghênh tất cả phụ huynh hôm nay đến buổi họp ở đây. Tôi là Dana, là Nga, thông dịch của BC Interpreter. Còn đây là cô Cynthia Grant. Cổ hôm nay là cô giáo để nói về buổi họp hôm nay cho tất cả phụ huynh về vấn đề học, tiếp xúc với tất cả phụ huynh hôm nay.
Thank you. We'll have Luz.
Buenas noches. Les damos la bienvenida a las escuelas de Boston y a todos sus participantes. Queremos dejarles saber que habrá interpretación en 5 idiomas diferentes. Yo interpretaré en español. Mi nombre es Luz Barreto y estoy muy atenta a hacer el mejor servicio posible. La señora Cynthia Grant es la que está organizando esta reunión. Por favor, localicen el idioma con el que se quieren conectar. Al final de la pantalla, en la parte de abajo, hay un mundo que tiene diferentes banderas y dice el intérprete, mi nombre es Luz y estoy interpretando en español. Si ustedes tocan ese botón, entrarán a un salón conmigo y estaremos hablando en español. Si quieren poner preguntas, lo pueden hacer en el chat más adelante. Inicialmente van a contestar algunas preguntas que ya se enviaron por correo. Estamos con júbilo de tener a nuestra comunidad latina presente. Gracias.
We will have Moise for Haitian Creole. We cannot hear you.
We cannot hear you yet.
Moise, why don't you sign off and sign back on?
While we are waiting for him, can we have our Cantonese interpreter, Diane? Zidong?
Dana,
are you able to share with us?
Hi, I'm here.
Dana?
Yes.
Dana shared already, so maybe Joy can share.
Joy, please share.
Joy, 我是中文普通话或者是国语的翻译。今天晚上
欢迎大家到这儿来。如果你们需要听普通话或国语的翻译，那你们请你点一下荧光屏下的小地球，然后呢选择 Mandarin MA 或者是 MADANRIN， 这个是英文的国语或者是普通话的选择。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Joy. Moise for Haitian Creole.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bonsoir encore, mesdames et messieurs. Non, c'est Moïse Pierre, c'est même interprété pour vous après-midi. Dans rendez-vous, ça encore, nous avons un pile monde dans rendez-vous. Si vous regardez par en bas, screen, téléphone ou bien computer là, ou après un bouton, sous ta remet interpréteur, mon traduit pour en créole, ce soit langue ou hier, au cas PC bouton pour lever main, pour demander assistance. Encore rendez-vous ça, a fini besoin 7h ou bien 7h15 après-midi. Son rendez-vous prend un pile temps. Nous avons 5 langues, tape interpréteur pour différents groupes. Encore, si vous avez quelques questions, si vous regardez par en bas screen ou après bouton, pesez-les pour lever main. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you all. We have finished our housekeeping for tonight, just going over the agenda really quickly. We will have our welcome and purpose by Dr. Brenda Caselius, our BPS superintendent, and followed by the introduction about our working group by Monica Roberts, the chief of advancement. I apologize. We will have the presentation by Tanisha Sullivan and Michael Content-Passes on the working group recommendations moving forward for the exam schools. We will have questions facilitated by Monica Roberts. We will prioritize questions received via email, followed by live questions. You will be able to submit your questions. Once the presentation is finished, we will open up that link and you will be able to submit your questions. If you just locate the Q&A link at the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to submit questions at that time. We will have wrap up and next steps, and we will ask that you would join us for our school committee meeting following. I will turn this over to Dr. Brenda Caselius.
Victoria, I have just a quick question before we get started. So I noticed that the interpreters aren't interpreting what you're saying. So I'm wondering if we need further instruction for the channels to be open, or if, should I speak and then wait? And they'll.
The channels need to be open.
Yes.
Mine is not open. Spanish.
So Rhiannon, I know that it says the channels are active to select and listen. So I wonder if they're not open for the interpreters. I want to make sure that that's clarified first.
Hi there, yes, make sure that you select your language and that you go to that channel to listen to that particular audio. So if you're an interpreter, you select that channel and then you would also do that as an attendee to listen.
And would the interpreters need to be on mute at this time, Rhiannon?
I don't have my flag. I don't have my Spanish flag to join my channel.
It should say Spanish.
It doesn't. I don't have anything.
翻译说他们的频道有问题。
I do see the Haitian.
You should see a little icon at the bottom that says the languages are available. And you would select that.
Where would that be?
It's the world at the bottom, the picture of the world icon at the bottom of your screen.
That's part of the problem. I don't see it. I don't know if the other interpreters see it.
Did you receive an alert to listen, or did you receive an alert for the language?
No.
Let's try it again.
What do I try?
For two languages.
How do I try it? Go
You will
back,
get an
go
alert.
out and come back?
现在西班牙语的翻译还
Okay.
Did you see the alert?
No.
Did you see the alert at any point during the presentation?
No.
Let's try reassigning.
Thank everybody for their patience.
Thank you again for your patience. As Dr. Casillas said, it's important that we make sure that all of our families have access to listen to this important information. So we just want to make sure that the interpretation is working for all families. Thank you for bearing with us. We do appreciate you joining us tonight.
Does anyone see the alerts there? Because language interpretation should be active.
Dana said she sees the Vietnamese. Maybe they can put in the chat if they're hooked out, if they're on, so that we can see if all of our languages are represented. Joy, Hyungdong, Dana, Moise. Moise says he's connected.
Moise, he said he's good. Luz, are you still not connected?
No, I still don't see my world.
Okay.
Oh gosh. Should I go back out? Should I go out and come back in?
Yeah,
I'm
why
trying
don't you
doing
try
that.
that, Lewis, and see if that works. If it doesn't, then I can just speak and then you can maybe speak after me.
Okay, let me go out and come back.
Is that everybody else connected though?
Yes.
Okay. And it's also in closed caption as well, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I apologize, everybody. We'll get this connected up.
Thank you for your patience. We should have this rectified very shortly.
Oh shoot, I don't know why I don't see my world. Oh.
All right, Luz, you should have seen it now. Are you all set?
Is everybody connected but me?
Yes.
Can you describe for Luz, Rhiannon, where it is exactly located so she can look for it? Like between which icons in the bottom?
Oh, I got it.
Okay, good.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right, so everyone should have received a prompt, who is an interpreter, and then you accept, and then you start your interpretation session, and attendees will be listening by choosing from the language menu. And I see all the languages available, so make sure that you select that from the globe.
Entonces, por favor, ya pueden ver en la parte de abajo, hay iconos diferentes. Nosotros tenemos el de español, que es la bandera de España, está en rojo y en amarillo, así que por favor toquen ese icono y estarán en el salón conmigo oyendo la presentación en español, que es muy importante.
Okay, and now do interpreters go on mute? Okay. I want to thank everybody for their incredible patience this evening, and we will try to be brief but thorough in our presentation now that we've lost just a little bit of time, so that we will have some time for some of your questions. As a reminder, we will also be going and reviewing this this Wednesday at school committee as well. It's also up and available on our website, so that you can go up there and view it there as well. I want to thank Chair Lecanto for being on the call this evening with us, as well as Mike Contopasis and Tanisha Sullivan, co-chairs of the working group. I'd also like to thank the team at BPS under the leadership of Chief Roberts, who leads up our Family Engagement Office and Exam School Initiative work, along with Mr. Harold Miller in the Opportunity Gaps Office, who have been working tremendously in order to make sure that we could bring forward what we think are fair recommendations that give our students an opportunity, given the COVID-19 crisis that has occurred and the limited opportunities we know that some of our families are disproportionately being impacted by throughout the city. And so we're trying to address those learning losses and opportunities of disengagement for some students, or other family crisis such as homelessness, joblessness, or other health crisis that has affected families, and trying to work a workable solution for 1 year while we are in this crisis to address equity issues for our student body in the entrance admissions criteria for our 3 exam schools, Boston Latin Academy, and the O'Brien School. And with that, I will not talk any longer so that you can hear from Chief Roberts, who will speak to you right now about the process and the working group members, and then she'll throw it over to Mike Contopasis and Ms. Tanisha Sullivan. Thank you. I don't know, Chair, did you want to mention anything quickly or not?
Oh, thank you, Superintendent. I don't want to take any time away from the presentation or the questions, but I want to just thank everyone for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to ask my colleague to go ahead and launch the presentation. Also, I believe that our Vice Chair is going to be joining us in the audience, but will be hopping on as well. So just want to thank everyone for being here. Again, my name is Monica Roberts. I'm going to move fairly quickly, but tonight we're going to do an overview of the recommendation and dig a little deeper to make sure that folks have an understanding of the recommendation. I'm going to go to the next slide, please. There was a working group launched in August by the Superintendent, Dr. Cassellius, which included a variety of stakeholders, members of the Opportunity and Achievement Gap Task Force. We have NAACP represented, former headmaster of BLS, our current exam school leaders, as well as other school leaders and parents. Also would note that some of these are alum that worked really hard over a 2-month period, a little more than 2 months, to come up with a recommendation, really doing a deep dive into data, which they will talk about in a bit. Today, Michael Contopasis, who is the former BLS headmaster and former BPS superintendent, and Ms. Tanisha Sullivan, the president of NAACP Boston and a former BPS chief equity officer, will do the remainder of the presentation after I talk about the racial equity planning tool. Next slide, please. So all Boston Public Schools efforts and initiatives are done using the racial equity planning tool, which allows us to identify how we might make our efforts in such a way that we think about equity and make sure that that lens is incorporated throughout, but also how we mitigate for things that might exacerbate inequities, and if there is a decision that needs to be made. So this body did use that tool. They can talk a little bit more about that if they so choose. But with that, I would like to turn it over to Michael Contapasis, who will talk a little bit about the working group charter and the recommendations. So, Mr. Contapasis.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts, and good evening to you all. Just a very quick comment on the equity planning tool. As Ms. Roberts suggested, we looked at lots of data, and we use that data primarily to drive the strategies and recommendations that you're going to hear about this evening, all of which we believe consider racial, socioeconomic, and geographic factors. Next slide, please. The working group was charged with creating a recommendation on revised criteria for school year 21-22. The working group developed a set of recommendations that would result in a clear and fair process for admission while keeping equity at the center of the conversation. Step one of the racial equity planning tool is to identify the desired outcomes for recommendation. They are: ensure that students will be enrolled through a clear and fair process for admission in the 21-22 school year that takes into account the circumstances of the COVID-19 global pandemic that disproportionately affected families in the city of Boston, and to work towards an admissions process that will support student enrollment at each of the exam schools, such that it better reflects the socioeconomic, racial, and geographic diversity of all students K-12 in the city of Boston. Next slide, please. The working group spent through their time in three major areas: understanding the current state of the admissions process, exploring how other districts are adapting their selective entrance school processes this year, and deeply understanding the availability, feasibility, and impact of potential criteria for this year's admissions process. I would now like to turn it over to my co-chair, Ms. Tanisha Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Contapasis. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay. So I want to just go back to the point that Mr. Contapasis made with respect to, actually, I think we're going forward, aren't we? Okay. My apologies. Okay, so I'm doing this one. So the recommendation from the working group is that for 1 year, the current exam school policy be suspended. The current exam school policy, as most know, is 50% standardized test, 50% grades. Because of the COVID-19 public health pandemic, and both the logistical and also human factors related to the impact of the COVID-19 public health pandemic, the recommendation of the working group is to suspend the current policy and remove the standardized test requirement. Okay. I want to emphasize that this is a 1-year recommendation. When we look at then how do we create an applicant pool? It's important to note here that there are 2 ways for a student to be entered into the applicant pool. All eligible BPS students residing in the city of Boston are eligible for consideration, regardless of the type of school they attend. And so for that reason, the applicant pool is created by either a student having a minimum grade average of a B, or having met or exceeded expectations on the MCAS. Both of these requirements will look at pre-COVID performance. And there is a requirement that the sending school or district, the sending district rather, or equivalent, verifies that the student is performing at grade level. This creates the pool, okay? Can we go to the next slide, please? All right. The criteria that was selected, and again, I want to reiterate that to create the pool, students must either have the B average or higher, or have met or exceeded expectations on the MCAS. Okay. This helps to ensure that a student, regardless of what school he or she is attending or they're attending, they have the opportunity to gain access to the pool. It also helps to ensure that students will be successful should they be offered a seat in the exam school. Next slide, please. I want to also emphasize this point here, that across our exam schools today, students have A averages, A+ averages, A averages, and B averages. And so we have students within our schools today, within our exam schools today, who have at least a B average. Okay. Next slide, please. Invitation distribution. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that when it comes to the invitation distribution, who receives an invitation to an exam school, the MCAS will not be a factor. The MCAS was only one of two ways that a student could enter the pool. But when we start the process for invitation distribution, it will only be the grades that are considered. Okay. The first 20% of invitations in each exam school will be reserved for the top ranking students citywide. So regardless of where a student lives, if they are among the highest ranking students in our city, regardless of where they live, those students will receive an invitation. Okay. And in that 20%, we are focusing on the first choice of students. So students who are extended an invitation to an exam school, in the first 20% of invitations, will receive an invitation to their first choice, or they will be given another opportunity to get their first choice in the second round with the 80% remaining seats. Okay. Next slide, please. 80% of the invitations will also be extended to students who are among the top ranking. In this instance, students will be ranked, their grades will be ranked within their zip code. And the top students within each zip code will have an opportunity to receive an invitation to an exam school. For each zip code, the district will allocate the zip code a number of seats that is based on the percentage of school-age children residing in the city of Boston who are in that zip code. Zip codes, therefore, zip codes with more children receive a larger seat allocation. Again, within the zip code, students are ranked by their grades.
Clasificando de acuerdo a su.
Students are ranked by their grades. The proposal is that there are 10 rounds of seat allocation. In each round, 10% of the available seats in a zip code will be allocated. So if a zip code has 20 seats available.
Si la región tiene 20 sillas.
So if a zip code has 20 seats available to it, 2 seats in each round would be allocated, would be assigned. The order that zip codes will be placed in each of these rounds will be based on the lowest median household income selecting first, and the highest median household incomes by zip code selecting last in each round. Okay, so in each round, the top performing students will be given an opportunity to select their seats. Next slide. The projected impact of this recommendation is that it will increase socioeconomic diversity within our exam schools. It will increase geographic or neighborhood diversity in our exam schools, and it will create greater racial and ethnic diversity within our exam schools. Next slide. In addition, again, we recognize the human aspect of this virus and its impact, the impact that it has had on all children, regardless of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, where they live. This virus has hit us all. And so as a result, our recommendation includes additional preparation for all students who will be admitted for the school year 21-22. We're also recommending that there is an expansion of exam school preparation for fourth graders, for grades 4 through 6. We are recommending also that based on what we have seen, what we have learned through this process, and what we are hearing now from many residents from across the city, our recommendation is that these conversations continue, and that as the district looks toward implementation of the NWEA test for next year, that it also consider some of the feedback that has been provided during this process. Next slide, please. Monica? Oh, actually, before you go to that, Monica, can we go back just to the previous slide, please? Thank you. I want also to emphasize this point with respect to the NWEA test. Although we have in the district used the MAP test previously and continue to use it as an assessment tool, educators use it as an assessment tool, The NWEA test for exam, if we were to use it for the exam school admissions, is a different test. It's different content-wise, and it is different from a security standpoint. So although there's familiarity with MAP-like tests, the exam that would be used for the admissions process would be very different. Next slide. Monica.
Thank you. So I just want to talk a little bit about the timeline moving forward. As most of you noticed, the school committee will be taking up this under consideration for vote on this Wednesday, October 21st. If the recommendation is approved, in November and December, we'll be doing the work of identifying the students who are qualified for the applicant pool, doing a lot of work in terms of outreach and making sure that our broader community is aware and able to participate in the application process. In January of 2021, in keeping with our usual cycle of school choice, students would be able to submit their school preferences. In February, we would do the process of actually running the choice process and identifying the students who will receive invitations, and those will go out in March. So in April, those who have identified that they would like to accept their seat would begin to get additional supports, which would continue to be the full first year. I would like to highlight, I know there have been questions about the timing. This allows the district to do this high school or secondary school choice process, which starts in January for BPS, but for many of our counterparts in the other sectors, they are starting as early as October through November. And so most families are looking to make decisions by March, particularly as some schools require a deposit depending on what folks are looking for. Next slide, please. Lastly, I just want to review a few things. We've heard a number of requests and questions. So we want to make sure folks have the correct information. This is, again, a one-year proposal. So this proposal would be for 1 year. It's suspension of the policy, not a change of the policy. And then after this 1 year time frame, the district policy will revert to its current policy. Also, we've heard a number of concerns that only BPS students would be considered. All Boston residents, regardless of what sort of school they go to, including homeschools, charters, parochials, privates, will be able to apply. We've heard some confusion about this being a lottery system because of the random number to break ties. This is not a lottery system. We will not be running a lottery. Meritis incorporated throughout, as our presenters have shared. There's a ranking of GPA. And then I think the other one I'd like to address is for MCAS and GPA. Some folks are thinking that folks have to qualify under both, and it's one or the other. They are just eligibility criteria. Neither one is rated more than the other. Both are allowable to get you into the pool. We do recognize that some of our colleagues in other schools do not take the MCAS. Lastly, we've gotten a lot of questions about why the NWEA MAP growth assessment test, for the purpose of the selective admissions processes or exam school processes, cannot be done remotely. The test vendor, while they have done it for formative purposes, so some of you may be aware that for formative assessments, we use the NWEA MAP growth test. That vendor does not and has not used it for the purposes of selective admissions processes because of test security. And so they have indicated that that is not an option. So the only way we'd be able to give a test is to bring everyone in for a test. So with that, I'm gonna move on. I think that is our last slide. And I think what we'll do is go to Q&A. So I have some of the questions that were submitted from folks. I'll take a few and ask our presenters to take these. First question, why are seats going to be allocated to zip codes with the lowest median household income first?
So first, we had to identify a way to start the round process because not everyone is selecting, not every zip code would go at the same time. That said, in reviewing data from our exam schools, one of the data points that stands out is that students from lower income households are not readily represented in our exam schools. And so as we were thinking about, okay, which zip code would select first, what's kind of the most streamlined process to go about there, we did see it intentionally as an opportunity to help ensure that students from lower income households had the opportunity, or from households in communities that have lower median income, have the opportunity to be assigned to a seat first. We did see that as the most fair and equitable and just way to allocate seats.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Before I go on to the next question, I do just want to highlight our superintendent does have another meeting at 6 p.m. So she's going to be needing to hop off shortly, but we do still have members of the school committee here with us who will be undertaking this discussion on Wednesday. So for our next question, how about giving priority to BPS students first and not private school students?
So it's important to note that all schools within the Boston Public Schools system are public schools open to all Boston residents. And so to give a preference at this point for BPS students, again, would not recognize the fact that students, regardless of what school they currently attend, if they meet the qualification threshold, they are able to access the exam schools or the selective schools, sorry.
Thank you. Our next question, how will the admissions process account for marks in AWC classroom?
So in AWC is not a factor. All students who are applying or who want to be considered for the pool will have to do so through either their MCAS scores or their grading. That said, I actually just one piece to flag is that from a process standpoint, wanting to make sure that this is as streamlined as possible, the working group did recommend to the BPS from an implementation standpoint that for BPS students, BPS has the data. BPS knows which students have the B average. BPS knows which students have met the threshold for MCAS. And so to streamline the process for BPS, families and students, BPS will actually be in a position to let you know as a parent and your student know that they've qualified for the pool. And also then give you an opportunity as a family to rank order your choices. So that actually is something that BPS can do because they have the data. Certainly for students who are attending schools outside of the BPS system, there will need to be some affirmative steps taken because simply the district doesn't have access to the data.
Thank you. And this will be the last question from our pre-selected, from the pre-submitted questions, and then we'll move to the chat. Does each zip code, actually we already answered that one. How is GPA calculated with the 1 to 4 grading system used for elementary school in BPS?
Great question. And I'm going to, I know Monica Hogan is on, I'm going to give her an opportunity to weigh in. It's a great question because this is what we've had to do, what BPS has had to do for many years now, because GPA has consistently been part of the process. So no changes here from a procedural standpoint. But Monica Hogan.
Thanks, Tanisha. So in BPS and grades K to 5, students receive a grade from 1 to 4. on a number of different standards. So there is no overall ELA or math score on the 5th grade report card. So the process, as is consistent with how we've been using 5th grade grades in the exam schools process in years prior, actually takes 3 grades from math, 3 grades from reading and 4 grades from writing. And that is how those are combined into one ELA and 1 math score. Those are then put on a 12-point scale. And then the grades that are collected from non-BPS schools that are on an A to F scale are also converted to a 12-point scale. So that allows us to compare grades across sectors.
Thank you. And this is how we have, as a district, has consistently done this in the past. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just do want to acknowledge that one of our co-presenters got knocked off for a few minutes, Mr. Contapasis, but I see he is back on, so glad you're able to get back in. There are a few questions more just from folks wondering if the slides will be available after presentation. Certainly we can make slides available. Also, the other question is, are non-BPS students included in the 20%? I think you all answered that, but I don't know if Mr. C, you want to take that one?
Yeah, the 20% will include the highest scoring students from any school that they currently attend, as long as they are residents of the city of Boston.
Okay, and then the follow-up question is, I'm not sure if we asked this already, but why only 20%? Why not some other configuration between the 20/80?
So the 20%, and Mr. C can weigh in here, the 20% actually was designed to help ensure that, again, there was an opportunity for citywide, top performing students to receive an invitation. In some of the other models in other parts of the country, which you see more, which you will see is kind of the 10% threshold. We wanted to make sure that, again, there was an opportunity for the top performing students across the city of Boston to have the first opportunity for invitation. And the 20% versus a 10%, for example, seemed like the most fair kind of percentage to provide them with, versus, of course, having a system that was solely based on kind of the top performing students within any particular neighborhood. I also think it's important to note that, as a working group, and Mr. C can talk to this, we came to many of our decisions by consensus because there's a recognition that, many of us have differing positions on these issues. And so there was definitely consensus that came into play and collaboration among the working group to result in a recommendation that all of us could ultimately stand behind.
Thank you. Did the working group consider a merit-based lottery to distribute invitations among the applicant pool?
We considered lots of variations, and we thought that that was the purpose behind establishing a merit-based system for both the 20% and the 80%. That in both of those categories, the students who have scored the highest will be offered admission.
Thank you. I also do want to clarify for the 20%, because I see it's popped up a few times, that the 20% will equally include all applicants regardless of where they are applying from. Another question that we haven't had yet are, how are second and third choices considered in this process? At what point would a student be offered a second choice seat rather than being rolled into the next round?
So let me answer it this way. So the 20%, the first 20% will be allocated, will be assigned to first choice only. And the reason it doesn't roll to the second choice is because, again, we've done modeling, so nothing is a guarantee, okay? However, because zip code, the allocation of seats when we get to the zip code rounds will again be based on, the ranking of students, the likelihood that a student who doesn't get their first choice in the 20% round, the likelihood of them getting their first choice in the 80% round is pretty high. And so we really wanted to, again, fairness here, wanting to give the students, again, our top performing students across the city of Boston, the opportunity to obtain their first choice seat. Recognizing, again, as Mr. Contemposis shared, prioritizing the merit base here. When you get to the allocation of the 80% of the seats, if you are in round 3 and it's, your seat selection time comes up and your first choice is not available, will automatically roll to your second choice. That is similar, not similar, that is how it works currently. The way this process works currently is that, but when it's your turn to pick a seat, if your first choice is not available, we go to your second choice, your second selection. If your second selection is not available, then it goes to your third. Okay, so that's how it currently works. Nothing is going to change in that regard.
Thank you. Folks are looking for clarification in terms of if a student does not have an MCAS score from the spring 2019, how then are they considered?
The question then would be, does the student have a B average or above?
That is grade level equivalent.
That is grade level equivalent, yes.
There are questions about whether we are looking to rank AWC higher, participants higher than other students in the process.
There is no intent to do that. They will have to submit the grades as they are received by the student. And so if you are an A student in AWC, your grades will be A. If you're an A student in a non-AWC class, you'll be put into, the higher performing category.
I have a question that I think would bring a different perspective. A participant is asking, did you ask for the student's perspective of the test? I know you all had an opportunity to get some feedback from BSAC, which represents student voice across the district. And so wondering if you all wanted to share about that.
Well, I can suggest that we've heard from lots of stakeholders. And remember that we were charged by the superintendent to come up with a set of recommendations, given the fact that we were dealing with the problems that we're facing with COVID. And so the work group was assembled by the school department and the superintendent, and we responded specifically to it.
Okay, thank you. There's a question, and this might be for Monica Hogan, about where did we get our data in terms of the number of students by zip code?
So those percentages were provided to BPS by BPDA. Can someone help me out with what BPDA actually stands for? Don't actually know. Boston's planning agency.
The,
City of
yeah, Boston Planning and Development Agency.
Development Agency.
Thank you, Chair Locanto. Those were provided by their team based off of data from the American Community Survey. So both the percentage of school-aged children and the median household income comes from the American Community Survey, which is an annual survey that is done as part of the census process. So it is a sampling, whereas the census every 10 years that we just did is for all residents. The American Community Survey is a sampling that the Census Bureau does every year. So data is available more often than the 10-year census.
Thank you. My apologies. My nephew's ride got a little bit lost, so those of you little ones that might understand. Another question that came up is, last year there were errors in terms of who's invited to the exam schools, and how will the committee be part of making sure the calculations are correct with this complex process?
Might want to ask Chairman Locanto to respond to that one.
Yeah, and I can actually respond to that as well. So I can, and then Chair, I don't know, Chair, if you want to go first.
Go ahead, Monica.
So one of the things that we have tried to put in place is really have a triangulation where the Office of Data and Accountability will be part of the looking at the data alongside the Office of Welcome Services, which generally does do this data piece with the Office of Instructional Technology. Additionally, we have talked to the working group about the potential of sharing data with the working group, so that as we're going through the process, they're able to check our process and look at the validity of the data alongside us. So assuming they're all still willing to work along with us as we go through implementation, that is part of what we're planning to do.
And thank you, Ms. Roberts. And just to add to that answer, the committee will take under consideration, the school committee specifically will take under consideration the working group's recommendation to continue in its process. Of course, the superintendent can continue to use the working group any way she sees fit, but we have given discussion as part of the working group's recommendation to promoting it to the task force level under the school committee, which would include open public meetings going forward for further discussion on any changes that might be proposed to the permanent process for admitting students to the exam schools.
One of the questions is actually, when do students find out if they're in the applicant pool? And is this for the 20% applicant pool only? I can try to take that one. Based on our timeline that we presented, we hope to notify families. We'll start the process in November and December, and folks would apply in January. Families will know based on their MCAS scores or their GPA if they do qualify. For BPS, we'll be doing an outreach again to families ourselves to notify them. So in January, folks should be informed, and then we'll be able to rank schools.
So I also just want to emphasize, this is another opportunity to get some correct information out there. Again, kind of the pool, you get into the pool by either the MCAS or the B average, and by being at grade level. That's how you get into the pool. The MCAS, because we recognize that not every student takes the MCAS will not factor into the invitation process. So I just want to make sure that we repeat that.
Thank you. There is a lot in the Q&A box in regards to this equating of grades across school types. So from parochial to private to BPS and so forth. I wonder if you all can talk about how you all thought about that in this process.
Well, let me take a stab at it. we were looking at trying to find a short-term solution to A, developing the pool, and then B, knowing the difficulty in administering an exam using the grade point average or the grades as the determinant for placement in the process. So we didn't look at whether School A in Boston and School B in Boston use the same technique to assign a particular grade, any more than we looked at a non-BPS school. We are relying on the school in which the student now attends to verify that the student has a B average and is on grade level in terms of meeting state standards. That's what we looked at, knowing full well that it's very difficult to equate what happens in one classroom to another. And it is, I can share with you, if the work group continues, it will be one of the factors that we go into in greater depth. So that's the best I can do. Ms. Sullivan, you want to add to it? Or?
I could not agree more. I think, so that everyone is clear, this was an issue that we talked about rigorously as a working group. Because whether we're talking about within BPS, we're talking about outside of BPS, whether we're talking about inflation or in some instances deflation, meaning that students are being graded at lower scores than perhaps what they deserve. This is a real issue, and it's not just one that impacts BPS, it impacts schools all over the Commonwealth, all over the country. But it is one going forward that I'm actually glad that more people are coming to understand it as an issue, so that moving forward, it can be something hopefully that the district and quite frankly, as a city, we can take on.
Thank you. There are a few folks asking about if it's GPA or MCAS, how do you create a single ranked list of students? And just want to clarify that the GPA or MCAS is just for eligibility. It's not for the actual selection, the admissions process. That is where we are using GPA for the 20% or GPA and zip code for the 80%. Another question that is coming up, which may be the chair, given that the superintendent had to hop off, is how were the members of the working group selected? And then also the question of how will any changes for the following school year be announced?
What does the author mean by saying changes?
I think for the admissions process for the school year, for next school year, so for the 21-22 school year, after this 1 year period, what would be the timeline for announcing what happens beyond after this 1 year process?
Well, I don't think, to be perfectly transparent, we don't know yet whether the school, whether the work group is going to continue, or whether it's going to continue as is, or whether even the members want to continue. However, my own thinking would be that we would hopefully, if that work group were to continue, have an answer by the end of spring, or certainly no later than the close of school in June, so that everybody was aware of what the process would be. You can see that we've made in the work group a set of recommendations around that very issue. And so My own thinking is that the work group has to have an answer early enough so that everybody is well aware of what the changes, if any, will be.
Thank you, Mr. C. And I would only add to that, as Mr. C's pointed out, we haven't taken action as a school committee or heard from the superintendent in further regard with respect to how the working group will proceed, but we will take into consideration that proposal to continue. I think it's a good idea, but we need to talk about it as a committee. As Ms. Sullivan noted earlier as well, just to reiterate, this is indeed a one-year proposal right now, and we do have a permanent policy in place, and any further action for the 21-22 school year would require further action by our committee to set aside or amend that permanent policy for that year and future years.
Thank you. Question that I think arose, we talked about identifying BPS students automatically. And so the question is, will all BPS students automatically be ranked in the applicant pool, or is there something that they have to do? What's the application process look like vis-a-vis BPS versus non-BPS?
You want to take that?
I can take that one.
So
there's the process of identifying BPS students is because we do have access both to MCAS scores and GPA. However, the work on our end will be notifying families. Families will still have to take proactive steps to be formally considered as an applicant, because families do have to rank the 3 exam schools to let us know their preference and whether they do want to be considered because their child is eligible. So while our BPS students will be reaching out to them, they will still go through the process of formally applying to ranking the schools and letting us know that they do want to be considered. So for our families who had that question, that is the answer. And also for homeschool students, for getting that question as well, everyone will have to submit grades, or again, if you have a former MCAS score, it will be the same process. If this is approved, we will then move to the next phase of implementation, which is where then we will be able to notify you of the timeline and process. So you don't have that information yet because we have not had an approval of the school committee. That would have to come first in order for us to move forward in the process. Next question for our panelists. Sorry, let me just see. There are some folks asking about the number of seats that our estimates are based on. So how many seats are available overall? I don't know if one of you want to take that question.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Just our estimate. So in terms of looking at the proposal, what were the estimates you all were using around the number of seats that would be available?
The numbers, so the number of invitations.
Yeah, that's it, yes. Number of invitations, probably better.
We looked at, most of our modeling was based off of, I believe it was 1,100 invitations, recognizing that there's fluctuation from year to year, but 1,100 seems was kind of consistent across multiple years.
I think you all may have talked about this a little bit, but that folks are looking for clarification as to why the 20% are only getting their first choice option and not their second choice option.
Good. Yeah, we did talk about this, and I mean, I can go for it, or Mr. C, if you want to go for it.
No, go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So again, this is the point where I think there's been a lot of confusion from what I've heard. I've done a lot of one-on-one talking through on this point. At every step of this process, there's ranking, okay? And if a student is, again, and these are all simulations, so nothing is guaranteed, all right? However, if a student is offered a seat in the first 20% allocation of seats, that means that that student is ranking, again, citywide across the city, pretty high. And so if her first choice seat is not available when it's her turn to be assigned, the likelihood that she would get her first choice seat in the 80% allocation is very high. And we thought that it was only fair to give her, rather than forcing her into her second seat choice, to give her another shot at her first seat choice, knowing full well that if she's in the top 20%, she's going to be likely, very likely, at the top of her zip code to get her first choice. So it really does give the student, again, the highest performing students, two opportunities, quite frankly, to get their first choice.
Thank you. I have another interesting question. I think this is from folks who might be supporting in the community, supporting families. How do we help families through the process? Are there some things that folks should think about in terms of best practices and things of that nature?
That's your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
It is my wheelhouse. So I think one of the best things we can do is make sure that we're fully informed and have accurate information that we can share with families. We're hoping that as these slides are shared, and information is actually on our website at bostonpublicschools.org/exam, that really breaks it down in a family-friendly way, the recommendation in all the languages. So I would recommend that we do things like that. To begin with, just making sure our families have accurate information. The second thing is, as we start to distribute information, we will be sharing information with all of our community partners, those who are listed either in partner BPS or organizations that have worked with us over the years in terms of hosting community forums, as well as sharing information through our traditional and ethnic media. If there are formats or forums that you have not traditionally seen us market in and you think that we should be using something different, please do email us at exam@bostonpublicschools.org. And then lastly, we will be having an effort with our office, as well as a few of our other offices, in terms of really providing some support. I believe our parent helpline probably will have to be prepared to provide families some additional support. And in keeping with what we usually do, we'll likely invite our community partners to some sessions to talk through the process and to ask for your support and really helping families, as you're also going to get questions along with us. And we look forward to partnering with you on that.
Can I ask just to reiterate, perhaps, Monica, typically for the admissions process, what type of outreach is done and how will it differ this year? Or is what you articulated consistent with what's been done in the past?
Yeah, no, typically things are posted on our website and mostly done using traditional media. We're really making a big effort as a district overall to better leverage our ethnic media and our partners. One of the things I think we heard in the superintendent's first year, as well as doing the last 7 months during closure from our families, is that we really need to use a broader range of media points than we have typically done. So we're looking at that. We've been looking at things such as mailers, but we have heard from some families that with COVID, there are a number of our families who are experiencing fluctuations in housing patterns. So we are thinking about how we help families update their address and think about how we might have to mail some things out as well. So we're going to be looking. We know not everyone is digitally connected, and I think that will be the big piece for us, is thinking about how do we help our families who are not digitally connected get the access that they need, and I think mailers might have to be a part of that, as well as putting things, again, using the media that we've heard from the community is most effective.
Monica, if I can offer a suggestion, if the committee continues and moves to a task force kind of arrangement where it is anticipated that there would be meetings in the community, it might be helpful at those settings, not only to publicize them in advance as you normally do, but to have folks there who might be able to assist and answer any questions in terms of anyone who might be unclear as to what some of the requirements are. Just a thought.
Thank you. We will take that and use it. Thank you, Mr. C. We have 6 minutes left, so I do want to say, take an opportunity to thank our panelists. We received over 400 questions in the chat. I do want those of you in the audience to know that we, again, on the website, bostonpublicschools.org/exam, you will find the FAQ, which includes answers to many of the questions that we're seeing here. You'll also see the comprehensive summary of the recommendation, which also has a lot of information based on the questions that we have been receiving here. So I want to make sure you all have access to that information. I think if you signed up, we probably have your email address. So we can probably just send those in the various languages to folks directly, as well as I understand that folks have asked for these slides. So we want to make sure we do that. I want to ask our Ms. Sullivan and Mr. Contapasis if you have any last things you want to say. Also, I don't know if our chair or vice chair want to say anything before we wrap up and end.
I'll defer to Chairman Locanto.
Well, thank you, Mr. C. And I did want to give the working group just first crack at saying thanks to the members here of the public who have joined us this evening. So I'll defer first to Ms. Sullivan and then you, Mr. C. And then I'll be happy to wrap this up.
Thank you. I absolutely want to thank, I think there are over 500 individuals, parents, students, stakeholders, advocates on tonight. And I definitely want to thank everyone for weighing in. Certainly want to thank folks for the questions, because the reality is, I don't even know how long ago it was, July, August, whenever it was, when we were asked to take on this task in a very short time period. We came together to try to present the best option under circumstances that none of us want to be under, and that is this public health pandemic. And I really do hope that we can keep that at the forefront and focus not only on, the logistical aspect of this, but also the human aspect of this, because that's really important. That said, again, the questions are fantastic. I mean that. I am, all of us on the working group were into the data. I will say I probably, really into the data, really appreciate the questions, because the questions are what challenge our thinking and really help us to get to, some of the best outcomes. So please keep them coming. And again, hopefully, in a spirit of moving us forward through what is a very difficult time. So thank you to the BPS team. And thank you to the working group members and to the school committee as well. Thank you.
I don't have much more to add other than to thank all of you who tuned in this evening. Keep, as Ms. Sullivan has suggested, keep on asking questions. No question is unworthy. And if you have one, the chances are that 5 others have the same question. So the only way we are hopeful that this will work is that if we are clear in how we have presented what it is we're trying to do and what you all have to do in order to participate in this process. So thank you again for listening in, and hopefully keep on asking the questions.
Thank you. I just want to take a second to acknowledge Councilor Ed Flynn, I believe is on. I don't know if Rhiannon, if we can create a space for him to talk. If you can hear me, Rhiannon. I'd like to give Councilor Flynn a couple of minutes.
And while we're looking for Councilor Flynn, thank you, Monica, for recognizing his attendance. I'm not sure if there were other representatives, elected officials that were in attendance this evening, but thank you for writing in and speaking with members of the City Hall leadership as well as the school committee over the last several weeks since the proposal was made public from the working group. We appreciate your input and speaking on behalf of your constituents, particularly Councilor Flynn, who I see has now joined us, district representative who includes a wide swath of Chinatown. I understand a number of our Chinese neighbors have joined us this evening. So Councilor Flynn, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Loconto. Thank you to the working group. Thank you to Tanisha and to Michael, who I have great respect for your work in Boston for many years. As Mr. Loconto mentioned, I represent Chinatown. I also represent the South End and represent the largest Chinese community in the city of Boston. And I take that very seriously, as most people know. Language access has been probably the issue I focused on most over the last 3 years. Represent a large immigrant community. And there's a lot of Latinx residents in the South End and South Boston. Represent the most residents living in public housing of any district councilor. I'm concerned about the number of seats for the Chinatown community. I'm concerned about the way the zip code process is working. It appears to me that Chinatown is grouped into the zip code with the South End, and there's some areas in and around Chinatown, such as the Ritz-Carlton, that's also part of the zip code. So my point is, what I'm saying is, representing the Chinese community, large poverty, immigrant community, challenges with language access, as we had tonight with the interpretation last Friday. We didn't have the right interpretation for the Chinese community. It's been an ongoing issue. I've been working with BPS on it for years. We're making progress. We're not there on interpretation. A lot of work to be done. But are we reducing the seats for the Chinatown community? Are we reducing the seats for this immigrant community, this high concentration of poverty community? Many of my constituents are also undocumented. So I have an obligation. I fight like hell for my constituents. And I want to make sure that my constituents in Chinatown and the South End and in public housing are treated fairly in this process. Can you comment on that?
So I'm happy to go first. And Councilor Flynn, thank you so much for your advocacy and for your partnership on so many issues that matter most to some of the communities that are not always heard. And so I appreciate you for that. And putting on my advocacy hat, I want to be clear on this point. There is no way, and Mr. C can attest to this, there is no way that I would agree by consensus or otherwise to a process that does not help us to achieve greater equity, access, and opportunity across a myriad of indicators. Okay. Now, is this a perfect solution? No, it is not. And I have, shared with folks very transparently. I mean, we are on the record. The advocacy of the NAACP on this issue for 40 plus years is well documented. And so in this moment, as a result of the public health pandemic that we are facing, I personally wrestled with this recommendation, went from one extreme to the other, but ultimately landed in a place where I feel very comfortable, not just standing by it, but speaking to it. That said, it is my hope that as we move forward, truly, that we're continuing this conversation. You are absolutely right. We need to make sure that any process that we have in the district for anything is inclusive, that it is not just mindful of, but is intentional about impact on our communities of color, impact on our immigrant communities, impact on working class families, and lower income families across the city. So I am with you on that. And again, I'll say, is this perfect? No, it is not. I absolutely believe that there's more that we can do here. But I also truly am at a place where I do believe that this was and is the best outcome in this moment for this issue.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Mr. C, do you have anything further to add?
Yeah, Councillor Flynn raises some very serious concerns, and as Ms. Sullivan has suggested, no matter what we look at, it's very difficult to come up with, a perfect system of any kind. And, all I can suggest is that we've run simulations. We will be looking at the results of those invitations when they occur. And obviously, the school department will also be looking at them, and we'll have to deal with what may appear to be evidence of inequity, if you will, if that does arise in terms of, what the figures show us. And so one of the reasons that we recommended in the work committee to the school, to the school committee, that this work group be continued is to try to think about and analyze and validate the process and look at possibly finding other ways if we find that this didn't work as well as we wanted it to. So one of the recommendations is that we analyze all aspects of this process and come back to the work group and take a look at what the effect has been. Best we can do right now, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Locanto.
Thank you, Mr. C. And thank you once again, Counselor, for joining us to share a few thoughts on behalf of your constituents. And we know you take this very seriously on behalf of your constituents, as do we. So thank you for joining us. Ms. Roberts, did you have anything further that you wanted to briefly add before we close and wrap? I know we've gone a few minutes over, but we did want to provide a little extra time here, given that we started a bit late this evening.
Yes, I think one thing that would be helpful for folks to know, I know there's circulating a simulation that was shared by, I believe, one of our philanthropic organizations in regards to the number of seats that are expected to be available. I will say we did take a look at it, and that One is projecting basically on 80% of the seats and not the 20%, so it doesn't show an accurate cumulative number, but also is based on a lower number of invitations that we expect to go out. And so I do just want to caution folks how much stake is put into a simulation that we haven't had an opportunity to actually support in terms of looking at the data. We do know that there are a few things in there. While it was a well-done simulation, it did include data points that don't quite reflect what we would expect to be using. So I just want to caution folks with that. I know it's caused quite a bit of concern. So with that, I am wrapping up. I do want to thank again our panelists, all of our interpreters, all of my colleagues who have worked with us on this as well, and our audience for your thoughtful questions. We know we'll be seeing you on Wednesday for the school committee meeting, and keep your questions coming at exam@bostonpublicschools.org. With that, I will turn it to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Ms. Roberts, and thank you once again to Ms. Sullivan and Mr. C, who have been doing overtime work these last couple of weeks to help support the work and the proposal that the working group has brought forward to the school committee for consideration. This is much beyond this more than 70 hours of meeting time that the working group has spent over the last 2+ months on this proposal, which is, again, bringing us back to where we started. This is in response to a crisis. This is a one-year solution that is intended to provide an equity of access, if you will, to our exam schools when we don't have the ability or the capability to administer one of the typical inputs that we use in that admissions process. So we thank that group for spending so much time in working through what might be a winning proposal for the school committee's consideration on Wednesday. I want to thank Ms. Roberts and her colleague, Ms. Hogan, as well as Mr. Harold Miller for all the work that they've done to support the working group. And I want to thank all of you for joining this call tonight. I didn't start leading this conversation. The superintendent obviously kicked this off. It's our working group, but because she had to get off and cover another meeting, I agreed to help close this out. I do want to invite all of you to join us on Wednesday night. We do have another school committee meeting. This is the second meeting that we'll be discussing this proposal. And I believe the 6th meeting this year where we'll be discussing the exam school admissions issue. So we hope you can join us. We hope you can look back into our meeting records. If you want to learn more, you can certainly take a look on the website.
I think Mr. LaCanto, I think you're frozen.
The school committee, you can find under went into that proposal, as well as a video of that discussion. And I would ask that each of you review that material and then come to us and talk to us on Wednesday. We want to hear from you before we take our vote. We've been hearing from a number of you in email, and we read every email that comes across our desk, and I appreciate that. We know this is a tough time for all in this age of COVID, and thinking about our children's future and thinking about the future of our schools is part of that anxiety. But we want to make sure that we, again, create an admissions process in these extraordinary times that provides equity of access for all of our school students. And we think we have something in front of us that that gets us to close to where we need to be. So we look forward to hearing from you once again. We thank you for your time this evening, and we wish you a good night.